You again! Well, we are at the episode 9 of this tutorial series that will teach you everything you need to know to make a VR game in Unity. And I can't thank you enough for still staying with me and my horrible French accent this long. So joke aside, today's new video is on a subject that you guys wanted for a long time: how to climb in VR. Are you ready? Let's get started with the video then. But before, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and click that notification bell to never miss a new video again. Okay, so we are back in our little experimentation scene, so if you've missed some previous episode, no need to worry. The only thing that you will need for this climbing system is a VR rig setup with here the XR Direct Interactor that I made in the first episode, so go watch it if you haven't already. Also, I will remove for this project the two inventory snap zone that we made in the last episode because I won't need it for this video. Okay, here we go. So to climb, we obviously need an object to climb. And in my case, I have in my project this wall that you will be able to download in the description below. Thanks to Mr. Peanut. Now I will drag this wall in my scene and place it over there. Perfect. So this wall is composed of a big, wall and as children some block. And these are the blocks that we will use to grab and make our player climb, okay? Now, to make our player climb, here is how we're going to make it. If you remember, in the first episode, we used this XR Direct Interactor component to be able to grab object. So the idea is to use exactly the same things, but not to move the object, but to move ourselves. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select all my knob on my wall and click on Create Component. Let's call this one Climb Interactable. Okay, so to interact with these objects with our direct interactor, we need to extend from the XR base interactable script. So I will write using Unity engine.xr.interaction.toolkit at the top here and do XR base interactable instead of mono behavior. This way, this script will contains everything that is inside the XR base interactable. And more than that, we'll be able to override some function from the base script. For example, if I write override, you can see that I can override some function from this script. And in my case, I will override the onSelectEnter and the onSelectExit script. So in this script, after calling what's inside the base script, I will write in the console windows debug.log selectEnter. And in the selectExit, debug.log selectExit. Perfect. Now let's save our script and go back to Unity. Okay, so our blocks have the component now. Finally, to interact with them, we need to make sure that they both have physics properties. So I will select them all, add a sphere collider for each one of them, and also add a rigid body. And we don't want the knob to move, so I will set all of the rigid body to isKinematic equals true. Perfect, now everything is set up to interact, so let's click on play to test it. But before I forgot, we also need to set them to the grab layer. So in one of the previous episodes, we used the grab in your array layer to be able to grab with the XR Direct Interactor, but not to be grabbed with the XR array. So let's set everything to this new layer. And there you go. Now, as you can see, if I approach my hand and that I try to grab, the debug message is displayed in our console. Awesome, which means that it is working. Okay, now that we can interact with an object by grabbing it, let's use it to climb. I will select our VR rig. As you can see, we already worked plenty on other scripts to make the player teleport or move with the touchpad here with the continuous movement script, if you remember correctly. For the climbing system, we actually only need a character controller, so make sure you have one here. Now, to make the player climb, I'm going to create a new script called Climber. Let's double click on it to open it. Okay, we are now in a fresh empty C# script. I'm going to write Unity engine.xr at the top here and Unity engine.xr.interaction.toolkit. This way, I will be able to access all of the script from these elements. Now, in the script, we'll need three variables. A private reference to the character controller that will move the player, and that I will call character. A public reference to the XR controller that I will name climbing hand, and which will be the hand that we are currently using to climb. And finally, a private reference to the continuous movement script called continuous movement, really original, I know. So why this variable? Is because we want to move our player with the character controller component, right? But in my case, I already move it with my joystick movement in the continuous movement script. So the idea is to disable it when we are climbing. And if you haven't implemented the continuous movement script, well, no need to worry, just ignore what I'm doing with it. Okay, so both for the character controller and the continuous movement, I can access them at the start of the game with a get component of type blah blah blah. Now, for actually moving the player when he climbs, we will do it in the fix update and not update. This way, this will give a much smoother movement. Now, in the script, if we have a climbing hand, we want to disable the continuous movement with continuous movement enable equals false, and then climb. So let me just for now create a new function called climb. We'll work on it later. And when we don't have a hand to climb, then we can re-enable the continuous movement with continuous movement.enable equals true. Perfect, we can get going with the computation now for the climbing movement of the player in the climb function. So here to make a realistic climb, it's actually really simple. What we need to do is to apply to the player the opposite velocity of the hand, which is basically what happens in real life when we are climbing. We push down with our hand to make our body go up. Now what's left to do is to find the velocity of the climbing hand. And good news, we already learned how to do it in the second episode of this tutorial series. If you remember correctly, we learned how to listen for an input with the controller, and we can do the same to get the velocity of the controller, which is pretty awesome. So I will call input devices with an S dot get device at XR node. Give it our climbing hand.controller node. This way we will have the corresponding device to listen. And now that we have the device, we can get the speed with try get features value, command usages, dot device velocity. And finally output a vector3 that I will name velocity. And there you go, now with this velocity we can move our body in the opposite direction with character.move minus velocity. And don't forget here to multiply by time.fixDeltaTime to get the movement we need to apply it. Awesome, we are making giant steps with our climbing system. We can now move our player correctly by giving it a climbing hand, and now what's left for us to do is to set up this climbing hand when we interact with one of our climb interactable. So before closing the script, as we need to access the climbing hand variable, I'm going to set it to static. So what this does is basically makes it possible to access this variable directly without a reference to the script. And this works when we only have a unique value for it, which is my case here. Now let's save our script and go back to the other climb interactable script. So when we start interacting with the object, what I want to do is set up the new climbing hand. So I will do climber.climbingHand equals interactor.getComponent of type XR controller. As you can see, because we set the climbing hand to static, we can easily access it this way. And there you go, we gave the XR controller that sits next to the direct interactor component. Now, as we only want this behavior for the XR direct interactor and not for the XR ray, for example, I will make sure first that the interactor is XR direct interactor. Perfect. Okay, so that was when we grab a climbing object. Now, when we release it, then we have two options. Either the climbing hand is currently not this one, and in this case we don't care, but if we release the climbing object and that the hand used to climb was this hand, then we need to fall. To do this, I will, as before, make sure that the interactor is of type XR direct interactor, and then if the climber has a climbing hand and that this climbing hand is releasing the object, we can set this climbing hand to null. Oh, and by the way, in my case, to check if the hand is the same, I compare here the name of them. And there you go, we finished coding our climbing system. Now it's time for the fun part, testing our game. So let's save our script and go back to Unity. Now with our implementation, we don't have much to set up right now. Everything is already done, which is nice. So let's directly click on play. And there you go. Now if I approach my hand and that I try to grab, you can see that I can climb. That's awesome. But there is a little issue that made me way too long to figure out when preparing this video. You cannot see it well here because my hand is not visible when grabbing, but I'm not moving in the good direction while climbing. And the explanation is really simple. It's because to move to the wall over there, I rotated using the touchpad with the snap turn provider component. But when we are climbing, we are not taking the initial rotation of the player into account. So to fix this, we simply need to go back to our script and multiply here in front the movement by the rotation of the rig, so transform.rotation. And here you go now, everything is ready. Let's click again on play. Perfect guys, we succeeded to make a climbing system that works as smooth as butter. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, a little bit more code than usual, but the result is there and I'm quite happy with it. So let me know what you think of it, and if you have any question, please feel free to comment below. As always, the source code is available in my Patreon, where you can support this channel. And on that matter, a big shout out to the new Patreon who joined this month. You guys are awesome. Have a nice day and see you soon.